Welcome to Learn It, a series of digital scrapbooking tutorials by Studio Wendy at Scrapbook Graphics. Today we're going to look at the Pattern Maker, which will help you create some quick patterns for your pattern papers. When you look in your download, you'll see here that we have the CS actions, which includes Creative Cloud, and then the Elements actions here. If you expand that folder, you can choose the version of Elements that you're using and install the appropriate actions. In addition, in your download is a set of bonus shapes. I'm calling these the Whimsy shapes. These are shapes that are actually included with Photoshop, but you just may not have them loaded yet. So I've included them here to make it easy to find them. And then you have some bonus pattern files. These are the actual patterns that the actions are going to create, but I've included them as a separate download so that you can easily install them and keep them loaded even when you don't have the action loaded. So let's pop over to Photoshop CS5 and see how they work. I'm in Photoshop and I've loaded the actions, and you'll see here I'm in Photoshop and I have already loaded the actions. You'll see here I have the Pattern Maker loaded, and all of the actions are showing up here underneath that set. The first thing you have are the instruction file, and I've included this as a separate download so that as you're running these others, you don't have to click through all the messages. And if you press play on this, it's basically going to lead you through the instructions. We're told that the action is going to create a canvas with a pattern on it. When the color screen pops up, we can accept the default or change the drop down to color in order to choose a different color. When we're done with our pattern, we can run the texture action to select any overlay in our stash to add on top of it. And in CS, we can use the history panel to back up through the blending modes, or you can always select a new blending mode from the layers panel. If you have trouble with the Whimsy actions, be sure you've loaded those shapes that I just showed you. For the Make Your Own pattern action, when it pauses, you'll be able to draw a shape. Make sure that you keep it within the canvas and press play to save the pattern. If you are in Elements, this Make Your Own action actually comes in two parts. You'll run the first part, draw your shape, and then run the second part. And finally, be sure to rename your patterns from the preset manager if you want to run the Make Your Own pattern action again, and I'll show you what happens if you don't. So let's press continue there, and we've finished up the basic instruction tutorial. So let's get started with the first set of patterns. I'm going to run the dots 1 and press play. Up pops the fill box, and here's where we can accept the default of the foreground color, or if we want to get fancy, we can click down and choose a color right here, and you can use, of course, any of the color pickers that you've got here to enter a color. I find that if I'm just working on it for a kit and I already have a color palette selected, it's easier just to accept the black and white defaults that have been pre-recorded and change the colors later, which is entirely possible. So in this case, I'll just select the brown and press continue. And here again, I can select another color if I want. Let's go with a green. Let me point out one thing too while I'm in the color picker. Over here, if you have an exclamation point show up above your color, that means that that color is not in Gamut. Gamut simply means the range of colors available to you when you print on standard cyan, magenta, yellow, black printer. And that could be your home inkjet printer, or it could be a photo book printer that you send out to print. If this exclamation mark is here, that means that color cannot be created with those inks. It can only be seen on your screen or possibly printed with a photographic process. So just click the exclamation mark and it will pull that color into Gamut to the closest possible color it can find. You'll see it wasn't that big of a difference in this case, and just press OK. All right. This action is done running. We're left on the base color here, and I can, of course, change that color if I want to by just filling that layer with any color that I want to choose. You'll see here that I'm left with 3 layers. Let me turn them off so I can show you. I have a complete layer. The complete layer has the entire pattern left in a solid color. So I can change all the dots at once. And then I have the big dots and the little dots on separate layers, and those are locked down so that I could, if I wanted to, very easily change out the color of those dots. So that's how the pattern actions are all going to work. For each of these, you're going to end up with your base layer, your complete layer, and then your individual layers for changing out more than one section of it at a time. The other thing the action will do, if you go into Edit, Preset Manager, under your Patterns dropdown, I'm going to switch this to a large list so we can see the thumbnails and the names. Scroll down to the bottom, you'll see I have dots 1, dots 1B, and dots 1C. And what's great about this is these patterns are now saved here in my preset manager, and I can add additional layers of these patterns whenever I want to. If you want to back these up, just select them and click Save Set and save it to your hard drive. So you can run all of these and put them into one set if you want. When I referred to in your download that these that you had patterns, these are the patterns I'm talking about that have already been pre-created for you here. So that's in your preset manager. So let's just run another one. I'll accept the default foreground colors in this case, and you'll see here our pattern has now been generated, and we've got our individual layers, our combo layer, and our background. And then now when we go into the preset manager, choose patterns and scroll down, we now have the dots 2 patterns added to our preset manager here. So that is the way all of these are going to work. Let's go ahead and come down to the Make Your Own and take a look at that. I'm going to press play. I'm told to draw my shape, so I'm going to press stop. And in this case, I'm going to get a thin brush here. You can draw anything you want here. It can be a shape using the Shapes tool. Here, if I wanted, I could grab a paw print and do that. Or I can create anything I want with the paintbrush tool or any of the other drawing tools. So I'm going to hit B to get a brush tool. I'm going to make a W here. And then I'm going to press play to continue. I'll go ahead and accept the default color here. And when it comes up, I'm going to be given the opportunity to name the pattern. In this case, because I want the action to use the pattern and be able to find it, I'm not going to rename them at this point. I'm just going to accept the defaults. And when this fill box comes up, I'm going to leave it selected to pattern and press OK. Press OK again. This is where it's automatically choosing the pattern shapes here. So just keep hitting OK. You could choose to change your colors and select a different pattern as it runs if you want to. And now if I zoom in, you can see that the shape I drew has now been created into a custom repeating pattern. So that's how the Make Your Own pattern works, and you can use that to generate any number of different patterns that you want. Finally, the last step, I'm going to close out of this. Let's go ahead and change the background color of our paper here. The last step is to add your texture on top of your pattern. So here I've got the texture action. So let's press play. And I'm going to select an overlay file here. This one's by Amanda Rockwell, and press open. And this overlay has now been placed on top of my paper here. And if I zoom in, I can see the texture there. And I can also go back to my history panel and go back and click through the different blending options that are available for this particular overlay. If you're in Elements, the older versions of Elements, this feature will not work, which is perfectly fine because you can assign the blending options yourself right through the Layers panel here. So in this case, I can go ahead and select any number of blending options. And at this point, I can also duplicate my layer and apply a second blending option if I wanted to, as well as adjust the opacity to get the look that I'm going for. So there we go. We now have a finished paper that's ready to go with a fun pattern on it, and we can save that as a JPEG and move on to the next one. So that is how you can use the pattern maker as well as the texture adder and the make your own pattern actions. Let me show you one more quick bonus tip, and that's how to use the patterns once they've been saved. So I'm going to add a new layer here. Let's turn off all of these. I'm going to go to Edit, Fill, Pattern, and from here I can change that to large list. I can select any of the patterns that we have previously created, and I can also mix and match them. For example, if I fill the pattern with these dots here, then I can create a new layer, go to Edit, Fill, go back down to Pattern, and I could even choose one of these other patterns here. And now I've combined two patterns into one using the patterns that I have here. So that's also an option. And some of these will work really nicely together. Some of the dot actions and the stripe actions you can use together. So I just wanted to show you that. That's how you can fill a layer with a pattern that you've already created. So that's the pattern maker, and I hope that this has been helpful, and I will see you next time.